Good morning and hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brooke Kamen Rappaport. I am the Deputy Director and Martin Friedman Chief Curator of Madison Square Park Conservancy here in New York City. Keats Meyer, the Conservancy's Executive Director, is out of the office today, and she extends a welcome to you as well. Thank you to our colleagues, Dana Klein, Truth Mary Cole, and Hannah Sturz for their work on our program this morning. Madison Square Park Conservancy commissions visionary artists to realize public art on a 7-acre site. The adaptability and need for urban space has only heightened across this long year, confirming a park's role for artists and students, families and communities, workers, neighbors, and protesters. We are now 1 year out from the beginning of pandemic lockdown, from the loss of 532,355 lives from the coronavirus just in this country. We mark 1 year since Breonna Taylor was killed by police in Louisville. These are signs for private and collective outrage, grief, and agency and mourning. And they're also interpreted by the artists with whom we work. I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers about their own work centered on the artists they represent and show. Today, we welcome 3 distinguished colleagues, Nicole Berry, Ebony L. Haynes, and Sean Kelly in the gallery and art fair worlds, and our moderator, Judd Tully, whose writing focuses on the art market, to discuss the challenges and fortitude of this long year. The Conservancy has been hosting public conversations on Zoom since last June to consider issues in public art, contemporary art, and civic sphere. Galleries and art fairs are the commercial and often social heartbeat of the art world. They can be the nexus of discovery to see work by new, local, and international artists for collectors, curators, writers, and for the public. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers and moderator. Nicole Berry is the Executive Director of the Armory Show. She leads the development and strategic vision, directly overseeing exhibitor relations and spearheading the fair's VIP program. She joined the Armory Show in 2016 as Deputy Director and became Executive Director the next year. From 2011 through 2016, Nicole served as Deputy Director of Expo Chicago. She began her career at Sotheby's in London and subsequently worked in New York City at Vivian Horan Fine Art, James Goodman Gallery, and Nathan A. Bernstein Gallery. She received a BA from Colgate University and an MA in Art History from the University of California at Davis. Ebony L. Haynes is a writer and curator from Toronto. She is based in New York City, where she's director at David's Werner and charged with leading the program of a new gallery scheduled to open this fall. Haynes is the founder of the Black Art Sessions, which offers free professional practice classes to Black students. And Ebony is a visiting lecturer at the Yale School of Art. She received an MFA in criticism and curatorial practice from Ontario College of Art and Design University. Sean Kelly began his career in England as an artist, subsequently serving as a museum curator and director before relocating to New York City, where he established Sean Kelly Gallery in 1991. In 2018, the gallery launched Collect Wisely, an advertising, podcast, social media, and event-driven campaign aimed at refocusing the discourse around collecting. He is committed to education, human rights, and social justice issues. Recently, Sean and Mary Kelly donated their extensive collection of James Joyce material to the Morgan Library and Museum. He serves on the board of PEN America and is co-chair of the annual PEN Literary Gala. Judd Tully is an award-winning journalist and widely published art world writer and art critic. His work has appeared in publications ranging from Cigar Aficionado and Flash Art to the San Francisco Chronicle, Washington Post, and Art Info. Currently, he is reporting on the International auction and art fair market, regularly appearing in Artsy, the art newspaper, the Robb Report, and other publications. He is also serves as chair of the Reuben Kaddish Foundation in New York. Judd attended American University and pursued an MA at the University of Oregon. Please add your questions to the chat for our speakers at any time during the program, and we'll reserve time at the end for questions. And now on to our conversation.
Thanks, Brooke. You put everything in quite a perspective in terms of where we are right now. And so just to briefly start out, it has been a harrowing year for most of us. Firstly, wanting to know from each of the panelists, what has been the most challenging aspect of the pandemic in terms of going about your normal way of doing business? And shall we start, say, with Ebony?
I knew you were going to start with me. I don't know how I feel it. The most challenging aspect of the pandemic, to be quite honest and candid, I'm a new parent, and having to prioritize or feeling the sense of urgency, which didn't feel very urgent at all, but having to figure out how to work from home with a baby, like so many people out there, was quite challenging. That's not really a business answer, but I think it is relevant for a lot of people. I mean, we've had to figure out how to balance things in a new way, and I'm still trying to figure it out personally. Sort of figured it out, getting there.
Well, congratulations on being a new mom.
Thank you.
And Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of personal connection, obviously we've all adapted to Zoom, but one of the things that is very helpful, at least from the fair perspective, is getting to travel to see galleries and see people that you don't see just staying in New York City. That has been really hard, but on the flip side of that, the time here and not traveling has allowed me to get out to New York galleries, which has been really wonderful, but also connecting on the phone, connecting through Zoom with people, and longer conversations. So there's a bit of a positive side to it as well, so that you're not quickly, running in and saying hello and off to the next, but that you're really giving that time and space to whomever you're speaking with. When I first went back into galleries, I would sit for 45 minutes with someone and they were so happy to have you in their space. So there've been some positives to it, but it's also been very challenging. And of course, the unknown factor for everyone. I think everyone I talk to says, how can you plan, whether you're a gallery or a fair? How do you plan when you don't know when this will be over? We now have some light at the end of the tunnel, but that's been the biggest challenge.
And Sean?
I think I've been through 3 major recessions, 9/11 and now this. And the sort of sense of existential panic at the beginning of an event like this just doesn't go away. And I think, so the first thing is you have to sort of take a deep breath and understand, survive that couple of weeks and understand that things will settle down. But I guess over the months as they unfolded, the most challenging thing was going from being a gallerist, which is a very social occupation, to being very isolated and pivoting to being more of a content provider than a gallerist, because we couldn't open the gallery for 6 to 8 months. And the remoteness, as Nicole said, the remoteness of not being able to socialize and be with our clients, but almost more, as importantly, not being able to be with my colleagues, the people I work with on a day-to-day basis. I found I found that very challenging. I had the sort of flip side of Ebony's experience because I have two grandchildren, and I'm always looking for the silver lining, and my silver lining was that I got to spend sort of 6 to 8 months straight with them, which was such a gift that I'll probably never ever have again. So I think that whether you are a new grandparent or a new parent, that's a wonderful gift, even though the social isolation that comes with it has been difficult to endure. But yeah, it's been an unusual year.
Indeed. And I just noticed, Sean, that you opened your gallery in New York in 1991, which wasn't exactly the most economically upbeat time. Can I just
it was the longest recession I've endured in my professional career. It started in late 88, early 89, and it really went on until 95. Whereas all the recessions since then have been really whiplash recessions. They've been very quick. That one was a marathon.
Drilling down a bit into some of the things you've already said and Nicole brought up, what specific steps did each of you undertake, either voluntarily or otherwise, to cope with the critical issues of social distancing, curtailment of most travel, and a general shutdown or long pause of most of life as we knew it? And anyone who wants to just take that up, please do.
I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead, Ebony.
No, go ahead, please, Nicole.
We all got used to Zoom very quickly, and we all jumped right into the digital sphere very quickly. I think for the Armory show, we were very lucky because we had announced during our last fair that we were moving to September of 2021 and moving venues. And so for us, we had the ability to kind of sit back and let things unfold, what Sean was saying. We took a breath after our event happened and the world shut down, and we're able to touch base in a way with as many collectors and exhibitors as we could, talking to the galleries, finding out what was happening, what their fears were, was there any way that we could help them? We developed digital programming as everybody else did. And so continuing to have a presence, but not being, because there became this fair fatigue that it was an in-person thing that led to online fatigue. So not having too much programming, so we were overwhelming people with content, but still having a presence so people didn't forget about us in this, now it's been a year, in a 12-month period. And by the time the fair happens, it'll be another 6 months. So I think that really allowed us to take the time to reevaluate who we were, what we were. Now moving to this new venue and new date pattern, it allows us to sort of hit the reset button for what we are moving forward and to have as much contact with collectors and gallerists as possible to be as effective as a fair in this new normal that will happen soon.
And
yeah, I was gonna say, I really had to, Nicole, you mentioned Zoom and this new way of doing business, or just, interacting with people. I felt like I had such a block to really embrace this new way of doing business and meeting with people over Zoom for quite a few months. And I really began to cope with it once I embraced it and told myself to embrace it, and actively sought out opportunities to socialize with people, specifically artists. I really personally miss, more than anything, in-person studio visits. As a curator, I really was wanting, and just selfishly needing it. I wanted to talk to artists more, and their, phone conversations are wonderful, but I started scheduling regular studio visits with people and artists, residencies, also, social hours with other gallerists, trying to create more conversations with one another, trying to find ways to stay in touch, to talk about business, to think about what the next few months are going to bring for everyone. A bunch of different little think tanks. although I'm not tasked with owning a gallery or running an art fair. So my need to cope was really just how to stay sane.
Well, I think to that point, that was a big challenge this year, but not just because of COVID, but I mean, for me, the extraordinary kind of social unrest and rent in the firmament and what we thought was the civil fabric of our society under Trump was, layer upon layer of pain and agony. The murders of so many of our fellow citizens, of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and the Black Lives Matter issue. I just felt both incredibly oppressed and frustrated, and trying to figure out how to respond to those things at a time when it was very difficult to go out on the streets and to manifest one's anger at what was happening to what we, I think, rather naively perceived as civil society before and under Trump was an additional layer of complexity and anxiety. I mean, I think we're going to return to a world where so much has changed, and the environmental issues that are being raised now as well, or should have been raised a long time ago. So much will have changed. We've got a lot to adapt to and adjust to and respond to. We can't go back to where we were before. It's not going to be possible. So I think we've all got to really rethink the way that we're functioning, honestly, in a very profound manner.
Sean, since you brought it up, in terms of Black Lives Matter, the movement, can we ask, I'd like to ask all of you, what do you see as the short and long-term impact of the Black Lives Matter movement on the art world? And anyone can jump in.
Well, I spoke last, perhaps somebody else would like to take that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen some hires recently that are a good step in the right direction. Naomi Beckwith and Lauren Haynes. And so I think that's the tip of the iceberg. We have so much work to do. And it's sad that the events that happened are what it took for us to really take these issues seriously and take a good look at where we are. I hope that as things go back to normal, as the pandemic becomes a thing of the past, or at least we know how to cope with it, if it becomes more like the flu, that this momentum that has been gained during this period does not go away. It's imperative that we keep this momentum and keep focused on these issues, because there are so many injustices, and there's, as Sean said, there's a lot of work to be done, and things can't go back to the way that they were.
And Ebony?
Yeah, I am trying to think of how to answer this in the most diplomatic way, because I do think it's an important question for the record. I'm not, it's interesting, this moment of pandemic, right? For Black people, in a way, that there's always been this pandemic. There's always been a pandemic of violence and the mistreatment of Black bodies, especially in this country, not only in this country, but we're speaking about this context for this purposes of this conversation. And I agree there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I'm definitely tasking myself to do so. Many of my colleagues are also, and people that I am very fond of in the art world. And I think it's important to note that the work does not need to be done by Black people, and just to kind of state that explicitly. And I don't want to sound also too jaded, but this is not the first moment where there's been a moment where, white people who are in positions of power have felt tasked to answer a call to be more equitable And that moment passed, you know, it was 2018. There was, people were trying to be more equitable then. And my only hope is that gestures, you know, the art world are making now will continue. I don't want to say I'm doubtful it will, because I hope it will. And I think everyone should hold themselves responsible to do something positive and continue moving forward. Everybody who's not Black should do something positive to move forward.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the heavy lifting needs to be done by us as a society, and I think it needs to be proportionate, and it needs to be disproportionate to on us, on non-Black people, because the oppression has been disproportionate for so long. But I also would, I mean, I think Ebony's framed that very beautifully. I would also like to just sort of enter a plea here, and that is yes, we shouldn't, you know, just take this as a moment and move on. It's got to be really, we've got to hold ourselves accountable. But I also would ask us to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, we were just making some headway with greater equity for women in the art world. And, you know, let's not lose that momentum either, because that has been such a long time coming. And it's so disproportionate and out of balance. There are a number of things that need to be addressed here. It's not just one issue. There is, you know, they're all interlinked. There's the social inequity. There's the environmental problems. There's the financial and economic inequities as well. All of these things need to be being addressed at the same time. And, you know, frankly, the art world has not been very good at it. And I think that we can hold ourselves to a much, much better standard and all do much more. And I'd love to see that conversation. I'd love to have that conversation with my colleagues. We've started it. We're trying to be purposeful about it and conscious about it. And I'd love to see that conversation being a much more spirited and vital conversation.
And this could be an awkward transition in terms of, you know, some of the topics that have just been discussed and which will, of course, continue hopefully for a long time. But kind of steering back to this changed world, I wanted to ask Sean and Nicole how you've adapted your business practice to the absence since March 2020 of art fairs. And with that critical revenue drain, what, if anything, has taken its place? And of course, Sean is the gallerist and Nicole is the art fair director. So it's like either side. And Ebony, you're welcome to also jump in. But I'm curious about the, you know, atmosphere of constant air travel, hotels, going to 10 fairs around the world. What do you think?
Nicole, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'm happy to. You know, I think that the people that I talk to are there's a hunger to get back to going to an in-person event. And I don't think people want to go right back to, unfortunately, this fall with the schedule the way it is. 2021 might be a bit unique in that there's a lot of fairs planned for even for the summer, but then September and the rest of the fall. But I think, you know, we've had a really great response to the new venue, to the date shift. And I think that the fact that so many galleries, both long-term loyal galleries who participated for many years at the ARMR show and ones that haven't participated in some of them 17 years, want to come back. People miss that aspect of that you can't get in the digital realm. So OVRs are great and they serve their purpose, but you know, there's a sense of discovery that happens at an in-person fair. And so we have just been plugging away to do what we can to make sure that the September Fair happens if it's safe. We will only, safety is our number one priority. And then after that, we want to make sure that people are able to show their artists in New York City. Everyone I talk to misses New York. They want to get back to New York. And no one wants to jump back on that hamster wheel of a fair every week somewhere in the world. I think that's what we've learned is you don't have to be everywhere all the time. I think there's a nice balance that we'll all be able to figure out, and that's an individual preference, right? I'm missing travel terribly, so I can't wait to get back on a plane. But someone else, it may take a while. And I think galleries will be more selective, and I think collectors will be more selective about how many fairs they go to, which fairs they're going to go to. But we've seen a really great response to wanting to participate, wanting us to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, as I said, trying to look for the silver linings. I mean, this is the last year is the first time in 4 decades I haven't been getting on a plane literally weekly. And that has been a great privilege, frankly. I've enjoyed not having to do that for a while, but it is getting a little old at this point. I think Nicole's exactly right. People are hungry to get back. They want to get back in the galleries. They want to get back in front of art. There is no substitute for standing in the presence and the aura of the object and feeling it in real life. And art fairs are a very large component of that. I think when people come back, they will be being more selective. They'll be thinking about what travel they do in very different ways. The one thing I would just add as a thought to that, so I think everything Nicole said is correct. The one thing I would add to that is we may have all felt that it was okay for this period of time, 12, 16, 18 months, until we get back to some semblance of what we were doing before. But I would just say that I don't think that's sustainable. I think the social interaction that the fairs provide, both one-on-one between dealers and clients and, en masse socially, a lot of people I've talked to with Collect Wisely have talked about how their collecting has almost become a lifestyle that they enjoy. And, they've been divorced from that for a long period of time. And no amount of OVR or marketing or digital content provision can replace those interactions. And people are really hungry for them. And so I think that the return will be really quite swift and profound, but I think more selective.
I wanted to ask Ebony, with your new and instantly high-profile position at David Zwirner as director of a new exhibition program and gallery space, I recall something a phrase you talked about in describing your interest in low and slow shows. And can you delve into that a bit?
Sure. I think that's a great on the heels of what Sean and Nicole were just saying. One thing that we all have been feeling, I think, at some point in our careers, maybe, I think for me, it came and went in waves, ebbs and flows of being packed, this packed schedule of traveling, fairs in between, opening shows in between that. And I felt a sense of sadness every time a show would come down. I mean, me in particular, I was programming 3 galleries at the same time, 2 in New York, 1 in LA. And between that schedule, I'd often have 2 openings a month and 1 closing in the same month. And then, I'm just kind of turning over these shows. And it's hard. It's hard work to put a show up, as my colleagues can, have all felt, I'm sure. You invest a lot of time in it. The artists work very hard towards it. And I just, I've been dreaming for years of a space where we could really just mount shows and keep them up for a long time and really experience them and give people a chance to visit them and have the artists work towards a show that has the time to be seen and experienced by a large group of people. So the model will be one show every 3 months, so 4 shows a year, maybe 3, maybe the show, I think the show will warrant a longer runtime, which is possible. And it'll all be for sale. So not a museum schedule. I mean, a museum schedule, but it's definitely a commercial gallery.
But I think that's a very good point. And I just wanted to pick up on something that Ebony said, because one of the things that we decided during this year was that we were going to cut a show out of the year and slow the schedule down, so that we've actually removed a show out of our schedule to allow the year to be less compressed and less pressurized. And that may seem antithetical to the moment, but I don't think it is. I think, there are so many slow movements, whether it's cooking or food or, things related to the environment. I think the art world would be very well advised to learn from that. And I think that's a very, very smart way to go.
Yeah, I feel like I've been dreaming about this for years. I can't believe I get to do it.
And just going back, and all of these things are so interrelated in terms of, yes, the art world is about commerce, and, yes, we're at a new kind of, as they say, new normal, or we're not even quite there yet. But I wanted to ask Sean, in for a bit more perspective on the art fair world. What are you thinking about for your gallery going forward? And maybe you can just say, like, how many fairs you usually or typically in the old world participated in?
Yeah, I mean, at the height of it, we were up to 9 fairs, which is actually more fairs than we do shows a year in a single gallery. And if you accept that August is when we're not here, you're almost doing 1 fair a month. Some of our colleagues were doing far more than that. Yeah. So I think it became, you can turn yourself into a machine that just functions for art fairs. And I think that, that's what Ebony's talking to. That's a deeply unsatisfying way of being in our world if we really care about art and artists and exhibitions. It's like empty calories. So that, I think this pause has allowed us to really assess that. Moving forward, we're definitely going to be doing less fairs. We're going to be doing the fairs more selectively. I know some of my colleagues have said they're not going to do fairs at all. I think that we're pivoting a little bit to change the model and be less of a hamster on the wheel, and try it as much as possible to get back to the things that we care about and the core ideals of why I love what I do, and I got involved in this 4 decades ago. It wasn't to spend my life on a plane going to art fairs. They're very important. I'm not arguing that. Before Nicole, eviscerates me, and I love Nicole dearly and the fair. But they have to be part of our world, not the whole raison d'etre.
And Nicole, with that feedback from Sean and you as a fair director, and I'm sure you've probably heard things like this, how will you adapt, or what are you thinking about in terms of perhaps what changes you'll bring to the Armory show?
I think the new venue is first and foremost a really big issue, which is why we've seen so much interest. I think there were a lot of people who participated many years ago and said, we'll wait until you get a venue that we want to be at. The location of it, first and foremost, is perfect. I mean, we're a stone's throw from Sean's gallery, so people will have to go visit him as well. But the whole West Side corridor, being a part, and for us, I think collaboration is something that is really important for this year. So we will be, working with the Whitney and with the High Line and with all the galleries, whether they're participating in the Armory Show or not. We want to make sure that the people that are coming to visit the fair are also experiencing everything in the city. We've launched a program called Armory Off-Site this year, which will working with the DOT and with the Parks Department and Hudson River Park Trust, so that exhibitors can have an opportunity to site large-scale works throughout the city. So really these partnerships that go deeper than just, oh, we're going to give your organization VIP passes for the fair, to really, we're a New York fair. We've really gone back to looking at what that means. And with so many smaller non-for-profits, artists, galleries that have been really hurt during this pandemic, what can we do for them? How can we be of service to our exhibitors first, but also the larger New York community? I think it's really important. And so making sure that everybody has their best foot forward when people are here visiting, and making sure that we're year round engaging with as many of the arts organizations as we can to partner in meaningful ways for them. That, I think those are things that we really worked on this past year.
And I'm sure all.
Jed, can I just provide a little bit of context for that, for the art fair situation? The new Basel financial report is out, and what that tells us is that New York is 40% of the global art market. Britain is around 20%. China's, China and that area is about 20%, and the other, percentages are scattered around. Look, and of America, New York is 60% of that 40%. So in terms of primacy and centrality, it just reinforces yet again the New York art world is hugely important to this market, and that post-Brexit and post-pandemic, and with travel being reevaluated, those other markets, I think that those statistics will look very, very different next year when we see the Art Basel report. So it just reinforces how important America is and how important New York is.
For sure, and thank goodness for that, since we're all here. And but I'm sure all of you were surprised or shocked at the recent news of Metro Pictures, their announcement of closing shop at the end of 2021, and the almost instant announcement of Metro stalwart Cindy Sherman joining Mega Gallery Hauser and Wirth. Can you share any insights into this development from, where you stand, Ebony? I mean, I'm sure you've been following, historically, the Metro program, and it's such a major gallery. And
yeah, it's hard to, I wouldn't begin to propose or speculate what brought on the closing of Metro Pictures. I can just say as a fan, it brought the need to revisit what an epic place Metro Pictures had for me personally. I think for many people, the Pictures generation, just look at that program. As an aspiring intern, a little candid note for the audience, that's one of the galleries I tried to intern at. So I think it's a testament to, things are closing, not just galleries. The economy is struggling for a lot of people. I don't propose that's the reason Metro Pictures is closing. I don't think anyone should speculate like that. However, I can speak to the way in which they've decided to close. I really think it's a testament to the owners and the founders of that gallery and how much they value their staff and their artists. And so, the respect that they've shown their support group, announcing a closure at the beginning of the year, claiming that it will close at the end to give everyone time to digest things and understand the weight of it. That is very humane of them. Not something that we've seen with every gallery or every business closure. I think it's difficult in this moment to assess how to make an announcement like that. And I think they've done it in such a tasteful way. It just makes me sad that they're closing, just as a fan again of the program. But you know, I'm not sure why it's closed. I'm sad to see it go. And I hope all of the artists and staff find good homes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm incredibly saddened by it. I think, as Ebony is there, you know, it's an institution. It's an incredibly important institution. To be a gallerist for 4 decades is not an easy task, and Helene and Janelle have done it incredibly elegantly. And by the way, retained, you know, almost all of their artists throughout. Cindy has been there since the beginning, and you know, the artists have been loyal to them, and that speaks volumes. And they're a class act, and they've done it in an incredibly class way, and they're shutting in a class way. And it's just very, very, very sad that, you know, they either chose not to continue or saw a path that they wanted to pursue. And it makes me think about people like, you know, Andrea Rosen, who shut, and a lot of our colleagues who I think, you know, it's been a harrowing. There have been such structural changes to the way that the art world functions. And everybody has their own reason why they do this or don't do it. But I think the challenges are much more pressurized. And I think the opportunities for people who really care about art and artists, which I know they did deeply and Andrea did, you know, it's sad when you see people of that quality and class not proceeding, honestly.
Yeah, and something that Ebony mentioned at the beginning of the panel about missing studio visits and sort of in-person interactions. And I just want to go back to, or ask you across the board, because of the pandemic and everything or most things sort of heading into this digital realm, and I'm not even going to bring up these non-fungible tokens, but what do you think of the viewing rooms and the new wave of digital formats mounted by both fairs and galleries to both show and sell art? In other words, do you see this more as like a temporary fix, or is it just going to be, you know, part and parcel of the art market going forward?
I'll tackle that. I mean, and then from a fair perspective.
Sure.
We're definitely going to have an online component, even if the physical fair is happening. And I think it's important, especially in this first year when some collectors may choose not to, as we were talking about before, they'll be more selective about the fairs that they actually attend. We anticipate that even though we'll have an international exhibitor base, we may be more regional in the visitors to the fair. So I think that it is not going away. I don't think it's something that's going away. I think it will change and evolve as it has in the past year. We've seen many, you know, what started out as really interesting to collectors and successful sales-wise, I think tapered off by the time Miami came around last year. I think some collectors were overwhelmed by the amount of content they were getting, both from galleries and from online viewing rooms of fairs. But it has been successful and it's been necessary. As Sean said, his gallery was closed for 6 months. That was a time to reach out to collectors and sustain some sense of business going forward. So I think it was necessary for sure. But is it the ideal way to look at art? No, I don't think it is. So a combination of in-person and digital moving forward, I think will be the path. But I think both Ebony and Sean can speak more to that as having to sell in that realm.
I mean, just speaking for myself, I mean, I think people are, the OVR technology just it's not there. You know, we all pivoted to try to make these presentations as well as we possibly could under the current technology, but it really isn't there. It hasn't been resolved yet. It is not an alternative. It's a sort of pallid alternative. And I think that there is a degree of exhaustion that's set in with it. I mean, we've had clients say to us, we just don't want to buy something until we can see it again because we're tired of this. So, you know, the negative is that I think the technology is not there and a degree of exhaustion set in. The positive is that as I said at the beginning, by pivoting to almost more content provision than exhibition installation, we have found we've reached a much broader audience worldwide, and we're selling to people that we would never have reached before. So again, I do think there's a silver lining to this, but I think we need to refine it.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing major new to add, but just on the heels of what Sean's saying. Also, Sean, just a note, I love this glass half full and half empty.
I'm doing my best. I mean,
it's contagious, you know, it's contagious. Great.
I'm just clinging on by my fingernails. It's just like, I want to get back to work. I want to be with my colleagues. I want to see my
No,
clients.
that's not being sarcastic. I swear, I'm not being sarcastic. I really
No, I know.
But you know, I'm excited about my new program to really slow down, as we already discussed. But I'm prioritizing in-person visits, right? I'm staying open longer, hoping more people can see it that way. But I'm definitely going to have some presence online. To Nicole and Sean's point, I don't think it's going away fully after the way we've all experienced it in the past year. But we are going to have to rethink how we want to utilize, you know, online features. We're all overwhelmed with viewing rooms. We're all overwhelmed with navigating fairs with hundreds of exhibitors that are only available online. It's a lot, but I've really appreciated some of the online programming for a lot of spaces. You know, talks I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. You know, having things streamable and making that comfortable for everyone. So I'm hoping to have a very interesting online program, but still want people to come in to see the art.
You know, the one thing I would say is that I would love it if somebody would explain to me how you can have a Zoom meeting in less than an hour, because I think the thing with seeing people and having Zoom meetings is you cannot get out of it within an hour. So I think that fits your slow art program perfectly. If we did it all by Zoom, we're all slowed down so much by Zoom meetings. It's like clogged at this point.
Sean, do family Zooms, and then you can keep it to, at least in my family, we can keep it to under an hour if it's a family Zoom, because everybody wants to get on.
My family couldn't sustain an hour-long Zoom. I mean, are you kidding me? It's like about 3 minutes. We're all
Exactly.
On that note, and so we make time in under an hour. There are many, this has been such a wonderful and far-reaching conversation. Thank you all so much. Let me read some of the questions that have come into the to the chat. So Quentin Cooper asks, after the past year, do you feel that there has been a stronger push from galleries and curators collectively to repatriate artifacts taken from their native nations? Does anyone have expertise on that subject?
No.
I mean, I don't have expertise on it, but my broad answer would be no. You know, the question is, has there been enough? Has there been movement in that direction, Brooke? Was that the question?
Yeah, that's the question, exactly. Has there been sufficient movement in that direction, right?
Oh, I think there have been some. I can only speak to one example, but I know there was a statement made less than a year ago, you know, during our quarantine, kind of in the thick of it, from the Ministry of Tourism in Belgium about their African museum in particular and the criticism it was receiving. And I think there were claims about returning artifacts or trying to bring justice to the way those objects had been acquired, but I'm not an expert on what has come of that.
I think it's been, I mean, I think, you know, it has not been a priority in this year in the way that perhaps it would have been ordinarily. But I mean, to Emily's point, there have been a number of statements from different institutions. But I think one of the things that is starting to become more apparent, especially around Brexit, has been that with the EU and Britain making this separation, the accountability on knowing who, and I'm moving this slightly more from artifacts to our world, but the accountability on knowing who's paying for something and the scrutiny that's occurring in that area right now in our world is much higher. And that's been really speeded up with Brexit and the EU regulations.
Thank you. Okay. Lori Shepherd is asking, do you think that you can keep as many artists in your stable if you have fewer shows? Does that suggest partnerships with other galleries, or do you anticipate more group exhibitions?
Ebony, do you want to answer that?
Yes, sure. Another part of this new gallery model is I will not be representing artists. So I don't like to phrase it this way, but I mean, I don't need to technically keep an artist. My goal is to really work as closely as possible with them for a year leading up to the show and set goals with each other and what we want to achieve with that exhibition. And hopefully they already are in a great relationship with the gallery. And if not, perhaps this show is a step in the direction of representation.
Sean, do you want to weigh in on that question?
You know, I do think that there is a tipping point in representation, and you look at the list of some of these, the lists of some of the galleries, and it's hard to imagine how they can equitably really function in the best possible way for artists when the lists are so long. And I do think there's a degree of attrition there. I mean, I think there's the moment of enthusiasm and then it fades away somewhat. It's inevitable. It's got to. So I think it's a complicated question. I mean, when I was a curator and museum director, the reason I moved, it's super interesting because I think I've got exactly the opposite point to Ebony's, but it's the same point. You know, one of the things that frustrated me was that I'd spend so much time working with an artist and get so close to the work and then make the show and have to move on. And I found that very frustrating for my temperament. And so I longed to be able to sustain the relationship with artists. And I've worked with some of my artists for over 3 decades. And I love that. I love that relationship. And I think what Ebony's doing in a way is the perfect, thing in all worlds if you're emotionally equipped to do it, which is, have many more children and send them out into the world and support them and build them up and hope they find good foster parents in a way. I found that frustrating in the 80s when I was charged with doing it, and I moved to being a gallerist to avoid it. And Ebony's almost going in the opposite direction from being a gallerist to being a Kunsthalle. I think it's a super interesting model, but I love that ongoing nature of those relationships. So for me, it would be difficult. I think I did that and I moved in this direction.
Well, I might come back over to the other side, Shauna.
When I moved, I remember one of the a friend of mine who was very prominent museum director, who will remain nameless, telling me, you might not be, if you go to the dark side, you may not be able to come back. And that was pretty much before anybody had done it, honestly. And now there's such fluidity. Nobody pays that much attention to it anymore. It's about a moral decision, not going to the dark side. So maybe we could swap at some point, Ebony, and I'll come and do a year and you can come take over.
We can make it a residency. I think the one thing, that's why making the space commercial was important for me, because similar to your, love working with artists longer term, which I definitely appreciate, I'm really interested in selling the work. There's something.
We're gonna swap for a year, because I do have some cred as as a curator and a museum person. So it's like, can I have a sabbatical for a year and we'll just switch?
Sounds great.
We'll do a special booth at the Armory that you guys can curate.
I'll curate it, she'll sell it.
Perfect.
Saji Raphael asks, 2020 brought more transparency regarding art prices and availability, something that was treated very discreetly in the past. I think this question is pointing to the online viewing rooms. Is art going to become more accessible price-wise to larger and more diverse audiences, or still mainly approach the wealthiest collectors?
That's an interesting question. You know, maybe the panelists can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been my understanding that you are required to offer the price should anybody come in and ask. If the work is for sale, it can't be anything but transparent. And I think the lack of transparency comes from the optics of what a gallery is, and some people feeling they don't have the right to ask or are not allowed to ask about pricing. But, you know, there's always a checklist with prices if you're ever interested. And you can call a gallery and ask them, you know, I saw this work up in the gallery, how much is it? It shouldn't be opaque at all, is my understanding. I mean,
Totally right. I mean, it's actually illegal in New York City not to have a price list, to have a list, a checklist with the price on it at the front desk, readily available to anybody. So if you go into a gallery and you ask for the price list, they don't provide it to you. That's an illegal act. But I'd like to, you know, I just, on the back of that, so Ebony's totally right. I would, and we don't have time for this, but I just want to throw the cat amongst the pigeons. How about the democratization of Beeple and a Nifty selling for $64 million through an auction house? Where's the accountability in that? And you don't even own it, by the way. So that for me is, you know, is a super interesting challenge now that's going out there. And of course, it was a gesture made by Duchamp in the 20s when he published the Monte Carlo bond that still resonates. But the idea that the art world is suddenly going to become this transparent, democratic place because of the flow of information, I think is still rather optimistic.
Last question is about NFTs. From Sarah Stein Sapir. She said, you've touched so thoughtfully on a lot of ways in which the past year has impacted the art world. And though I think everyone is tired of hearing about NFTs, I'm curious your thoughts on the explosion in prices and exposure. Do you think this is a result of the past year specifically, or was this inevitable? Is this here to stay?
Please, somebody other than me.
I'll jump in. I mean, this is something that I feel only because of my reading over the past 2 weeks remotely. I'm really not remotely qualified to answer, but I think the fact that NFTs were something that we weren't really paying attention to and that they have exploded, it could go either way. It's something that if I think it's very driven by the tech industry right now. And I think if art world buy-in, meaning artists that are recognized in the art world start creating works, then there may be legs for it. But it's possible that it doesn't move in that direction. So I think there's a lot, again, there are unknowns to what could happen, but I think we were all surprised by that figure for the Beeple work. And you have to pay attention to it, whether you believe it's, an interesting way forward or not.
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Just briefly, I think that one thing, there are artists who have gallery representation who are creating, crypto art and hosting their work on these sites currently. And the appeal for them, as far as my understanding goes, is how much stake they have in their own work. So every time this artwork sells, it could sell 4 times. The artist always has kind of a stock in that sale. And what is really driving NFTs is just that. We're talking about new forms of transparency and equitable access and visibility. Artists are interested in how they can have more stock in their own work. And I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think the art world would not do itself any favors by ignoring the NFT world. I don't think it's going away. And I think I think it's a lot to try and comprehend, but there's definitely something there I know artists are intrigued by. So we would not be in a good position to just ignore it.
Yeah, there's an investment which is a bit like an artist, the artist resale right in Britain, where the artist gets compensated when they're alive through the sale of their work at an auction. I think that I do think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting both for those reasons. But I do think at the moment its characteristic is more of a financial instrument, an investment opportunity, where, frankly, for bragging rights with a different generation who have access and perceive trading in a different way, rather than, I would like to make the distinction between trading and collecting. But right now it's so nascent. I think the problem is the content is just not there. And everything ultimately will be driven by, if there's good content, people will remain interested in it. If it's very thin content, it'll fade away and become a kind of communication or trading platform.
Yeah, and in terms of that, whether it's here to stay or not, Sotheby's announced today an NFT collaboration with the leading digital artist PAC. So they've jumped in.
Yeah, because they're an auction house. Their competitor just sold something for 64 million. They want a piece of it. Of course, they're going to do that. But that's just about making money. It doesn't answer it doesn't answer the issue that I think we're all kind of committed to, which is content provision, right? It's about what it is, not how much it sells for.
And really quickly, I think, Ebony, I also read that the artists are, with every sale, there's a percentage, but I also read that some of the platforms don't support that. So artists have to be really careful reading sort of the fine print on that to make sure that they do, because if they're moving to that platform and not getting that benefit, that would be really unfortunate.
Yeah. And that's true. And just to Sean's point, Sean, you mentioned earlier about us, there needs to be more accountability for who's buying the art. Yeah. This is a case, something I'm really uncomfortable with is there's no, it's still about who has access.
Yeah.
And who's behind the computer and going to buy all of the shares of something, or I'm not even sure how it works, but.
And they're positioning this as being about accountability, and it is actually the most opaque transaction. You will never know who bought it.
Absolutely.
Unless they choose to disclose. So this is going in the opposite direction to the direction that the art world should be going, frankly.
Completely agree.
Nicole and Ebony.
And one last thing.
Yes, Sean.
Is there's an upside for the artist if the thing goes up? Is there a downside when it craters?
I'm not
question.
Sure. Good question.
Mm-hmm. Nicole and Ebony and Sean and Judd, thank you. We can't thank you enough for your thoughtful and deeply searching remarks this morning. And they've charted a way forward in the art world, and I think have also guided us all to action. So thank you for joining on this morning. I hope to see you all very much in the aisles of the Armory show, inside your galleries, and I hope that you'll all come to Madison Square Park to see Maya Lin's project, which opens this spring. Stay well, everyone, and thanks again.
Thank you.